Welcome to AP Euro for Winners.
Today, we're going to continue talking about Unit 2 with the Wars of Religion, and we're really going to focus on two wars, the French Wars of Religion and the 30 Years' War. So let's begin. So before we get to the French Wars of Religion, there are a couple people you need to know, right? So let's go into some context. France is going to be very Catholic at this time, and we've got Catherine de' Medici. She is the wife of Henry II. This is kind of what gives her the power, but then Henry II dies. So she's obviously not going to stay queen and stay head of power, but she remains really heavily involved in politics. So this queen regent of France is actually kind of like a puppeteer behind the stage, because we're going to see that she's going to be an influential mom to important people like Charles IX and Henry III, both of which are kings.
One thing I also want to bring up is Catherine de' Medici is a Medici, right? We've learned about that family before, super rich banking family. We see now they're like queens and stuff. So, another piece of context there.
Yep, so her sons are going to be in power, but really it's her, and we're going to see why. So Charles IX is the older brother to Henry III, but he takes over the throne when he's 11. So he's super young. Catherine rules in his place, right, because he's too young to make decisions. She's super Catholic. She hates the Huguenots, and she wants to kick them all out of France. So again, remember, she's having Charles IX do all these things.
Let's go over the main cause of the French Wars of Religion, and it is the religious persecution of the Huguenots. Remember, Huguenots are French Protestants, French Calvinists during the 16th and 17th centuries. Again, Calvinism is a branch of Protestantism. Think back to our last lesson. In France, this is a minority religious belief. It makes up about 10% of the French population. Most people are Catholic, and the monarchy in France sees this as a threat to the Catholicism because Catherine de' Medici, Charles IX are super Catholic, right? So they're seeing the Huguenots as a threat.
All right, so there's two kind of big events you need to know about what happens during the French Wars of Religion. We're going to start with the Massacre of Vassy. This happens in 1562. It really starts off the whole French Wars of Religion, and it's the main event. So we have a group of Huguenots are going to be worshiping at a service where a Catholic duke orders them all killed, right? So insert death. They all get killed. So this starts a 10-year aggressive battle between the Catholics and the Huguenots until we're going to see another huge massacre happens that kind of marks a turning point as well. This is probably the more well-known one. It's St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre in 1572. Another event to symbolize the dislike and tension between Catholics and Huguenots. So let's see what happens. Well, this day is a wedding day of Henry Navarre, right? He's a Calvinist, de facto leader of the Huguenots. We've kind of gone over him.
We haven't talked about Henry Navarre yet. He's like a new guy. Sorry, he's a new guy. I know there's a lot of Henrys. He's a new guy from the South. He's a Huguenot. He's a Calvinist.
We do talk about him soon.
We'll talk about him soon.
Yeah, a lot of Henrys.
So it's a wedding between him and...
So Henry Navarre to Margaret of Valois, a Catholic sister to Charles IX. I know there's a lot of names they're throwing at you. Right? So many Huguenots are going to attend this wedding. Well, Catherine de' Medici, remember, hatred of Huguenots, she's going to have Charles IX order the massacre of all these Huguenots at the wedding. Right? So that's what they do. People come in and they kill a lot of people at the wedding. But in order to avoid death, Henry Navarre agrees to convert to Catholicism. So he just gives in. He's like, all right, I'm going to convert. So this slaughtering is going to start in Paris. It actually kind of spreads to the countryside as well. About 30,000 Huguenots are killed. So it's a significant event, and it's going to inspire similar slaughterings in neighboring countries. Really just symbolizes the tension between these two groups of people.
So kind of like what happens with this is once the queen starts to agree to kill all these people, a lot of like other Catholics, just, regular Catholics start to kill Protestants too. So it kind of like spreads and starts violence. And I heard this cool story about this tree in this river in France. It was like this dead tree, and it starts to blossom when the Catholics started to kill the Huguenots. And so the Catholics took that as a sign from God that they should continue it. It doesn't really matter, but I just thought it was cool.
So they have signs from God, and their queen, well, not really queen, Charles' mom is telling them they can.
All right, so now to get into the French Wars of Religion, also called the French Civil War, also called the War of the Three Henrys, because as we see, there's a lot of Henrys. So we've got this new guy, Henry III, who, remember, is Catherine de' Medici's kid, Charles IX's brother, and he's going to succeed Charles IX. He's going to be the king of France. However, he is not Catholic enough for this other Henry named Henry of Guise. Henry of Guise is a well-known duke within the French community. He's super Catholic, and during all of this tension, he sees an opportunity to get the throne. And he gets some help from the very Catholic neighbors to the south, Spain. And so he takes over as French king for a little while. And he actually decides to make Henry III his chief minister to try to placate Henry III because he took the throne from him. Well, Henry III doesn't appreciate this very much, that his throne just got taken, so he has Henry of Guise assassinated. So goes back to Henry III. So Henry III actually ends up hanging out a lot with Henry of Navarre, who also wants to get rid of this thing called the Holy League, which are a bunch of very, very Catholic people in France. Henry III successfully gets rid of this Holy League, but in the process, he gets himself killed by a monk. So, who's our next king? It's another Henry, Henry of Navarre, who we talked about previously. That was the guy involved in that wedding. So, this guy becomes known as Henry IV. He's a Bourbon, part of this Bourbon family. That'll be important later when we learn more about France. But he, remember, was originally a Huguenot, a Calvinist, but he had converted to Catholicism because Calvinism was not very popular, because he wants more religious tolerance and he wants to keep stability in France. So he's willing to sacrifice his own religious beliefs for the stability of the state. This is what we call a politique. We'll talk about this more later with some other European leaders, but someone who thinks the power of the state is more important than their own individual needs.
And it also kept him alive in the massacre. So let's talk about some outcomes of the French Wars of Religion. So Henry of Navarre becomes King Henry IV, as we just said. So he's King of France, converts to Catholicism. Bourbon, again, we mentioned this is going to be important in later units. But this is where you have to know, the Edict of Nantes. This happens in 1598. It's pretty much Catholicism is the religion of France. It establishes that, but it allows for the practice of Calvinism. So that is religious pluralism, right? Allowing more than one religion to be practiced. So this is going to encourage domestic peace. It kind of settles things for a while. We're good. And back to that term, the politique, and that is what Henry of Navarre is, right? Believing the stability of the state is above all other matters. Again, you're hearing this twice because it's really, really important. So political stability over religious conformity, really important. So politique and Edict of Nantes.
So that is the French Wars of Religion. And now we're going to switch gears to talk about another war of religion, just not solely in France, called the 30 Years' War. So let's go over some context for the 30 Years' War. We got to understand this before we get into it. We've got this king called Charles V. We've mentioned him before slightly, but we're going to go over him now. Now, he is the king of Spain, and he's a Habsburg. Habsburg is this ruling dynasty, this family, right? Like if the Johnsons were a ruling dynasty, right? The Habsburgs are a ruling family. And they're in power for Europe for a very long time, and they are very Catholic. The other thing to know is that Charles V is not just the leader of Spain, he's also the leader of the Holy Roman Empire, which is basically today modern day Germany and Austria. So he's got two big powers underneath him. He's a super powerful man, one of the most powerful men in Europe. Now, at this time, he's going to have some issues with another group called the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire is you could think of modern day Turkey. Okay, so they are having issues because the Ottoman Empire is trying to expand further north and further west into Central and Eastern Europe. And so this makes Charles V worried. And so he's worried about it. And he's worried because not only got the Ottoman Empire, but he's also dealing with internal conflicts in his lands over religion, over Catholicism, over Protestantism, and he's not sure how to handle all of it. He does get some help from the Polish, and he repels the Ottomans from the invasion. But in part of the process, Charles V is going to establish another really important event here. It's called the Peace of Augsburg. We're going to need to know this one. This is where he allows German princes the power to select their own religion as Protestant. Now, this is really just going to be as Lutherans, not Calvinists, but he's going to allow them to be Protestant or Catholic for their own region. This is, again, religious pluralism. This is his way to try to keep the peace between the Catholics and the Lutherans to keep his empire whole. So, Peace of Augsburg is really important. We're going to get back to it later. Now, to finish up with Charles V, he's getting old. And as he gets old, he decides, I'm going to break my kingdom up into two. And he leaves Spain and the Netherlands to his son, Philip II. So he's called the Spanish Habsburgs. And he leaves the Austrian and the Holy Roman Empire part to his brother, Ferdinand the First.
All right, another person to know is going to be Philip II. Again, we're still in context before we're actually getting into the 30 Years' War. So he is, remember, the leader of the Spanish Habsburgs and Charles V's son. He hates the Protestants, right? He's really upset about the Protestant Reformation. And if you think back, his dad, Charles V, was super tolerant of other religions. Remember those things that he was passing. But Philip II didn't like his tolerance. He didn't want that. He really, really did not like Protestants at all. So he is going to aim to restore Catholic unity, and he does so. And we'll see this a little bit in the next slide, as he focuses on the Netherlands and England to try to reassert Catholicism.
Okay, so how is Philip II going to reassert Catholicism? Well, first, he's going to get involved with the Netherlands. Now, in the Netherlands, there are a lot of Dutch Calvinists, and Philip II is not cool, again, with the Protestants, with the Calvinists, especially because a lot of the Dutch Calvinists at this time start destroying Catholic art. And so we also have another person to know, this guy, William of Orange. He's a Dutch Calvinist, kind of like the leader of the Dutch Protestants, political leader. And he's actually going to declare independence from Spain under Charles V. He's going to declare independence from Spain. So we see that Philip II, though, he's not just going to allow this. So they've got some issues with what's going on in the Netherlands. Okay, now to get on to England. So Philip tries to marry Elizabeth I. Now we got to think back to our previous lesson. Elizabeth I was the daughter of Henry VIII, the guy who took over the Church of England, kicked out the Catholics in England, right? So Elizabeth I is a Protestant. Now Elizabeth I tries to keep peace in her country among Catholics and Protestants. She's okay with Protestants. She lets Catholics practice privately. And she also supports the Dutch and the Netherlands in their efforts to try to resist against the Spanish Habsburgs. Now, when Philip tries to marry Elizabeth, Elizabeth says no. Okay, she rejects him. And just so you know, she actually never gets married. She's what's called the Virgin Queen, and this is what Virginia is named after. But anyway, in response to that rejection, Philip takes it real hard, okay? And he's going to actually try to invade England to try to take it over and to try to make it Catholic again. There's a long story here, but the basic part of it is that he's got a bunch of ships that's called the Spanish Armada, and he tries to send them over to England to invade. But there's a bunch of storms that get taken over that start happening to the ships, and the ships get destroyed. And in 1588, the Spanish Armada, Spanish Navy is pretty much gone, and this is super embarrassing. This is a big blow to the Spanish Habsburgs. So what's the main result here of all of this context of what's going on right before the 30 Years' War is that this combination of the Protestant growth in England and the growth that we're seeing in France with the failure of Philip II's Spain to contain Protestantism helps Protestantism get a foothold in Europe, which is going to lead us into the 30 Years' War.
All right, so let's see what actually starts the 30 Years' War. We have Ferdinand I, remember, Charles's brother, leader of the Habsburgs in Austria, the Holy Roman Empire. He's very Catholic. He wants to re-Catholicize Bohemia. And Bohemia is just kind of a more Protestant part of the Holy Roman Empire. So this is going to anger the Calvinists, right? They don't want to go back to Catholicism. So, and not to mention that, it also goes against his dad, Charles V's Peace of Augsburg, which allowed religious tolerance. Well, Ferdinand I decides to send his minions to Bohemia and try and convince everyone to be Catholic. And what do the Calvinists do? Well, they literally respond by defenestration, right? It's called the Defenestration of Prague. Literally, the throwing of people out the window. So the Calvinists are going to throw the Ferdinand I's minions out the window. They fall 70 feet. They actually survive because they land on a giant pile of manure. Some people saw this as an intervention from God that they survived. Other ones were like, well, no, it's just the pile of manure. So a lot of people interpreted this event very differently. But either way, this tension is going to really manifest itself in what starts the 30 Years' War.
The 30 Years' War has 4 different phases, and it takes place from 1618 to 1648. And as we get through these 4 phases, we're going to see it starts off very religious, and it's going to become very political. Now, the first phase is pretty simple. It's called the Bohemian phase, and it's where the Holy Roman Empire, Ferdinand II, defeats the Protestants in initial battles, and essentially the Catholics are gaining the upper hand. The Holy Roman Empire is becoming more Catholic. They're kind of putting down the Protestant rebellion.
Then the second phase is called the Danish phase. And this is where a king known as King Christian
The
fourth of Denmark is going to take up the Protestant cause. And it sounds a little random, but he wants to get involved in this anti-Catholic, anti-Habsburg alliance with England. He's already involved in that. So he's like, well, this is a good chance to do that, literally fight the Habsburgs. So we start to see that we're not really necessarily focusing on religion anymore because he joins for political motives. But unfortunately, regardless of his efforts to join, the Catholics are still going to be winning the battles in this phase.
third phase, it's called the Swedish phase. This is where the war gets more and more big. Okay, so the war is going to start to go beyond the borders of the Holy Roman Empire. And we got this guy pictured on the left riding this majestic horse, King Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden. Now, he is a super big military genius, and he sees an opportunity of what's going on in Europe. He starts to organize the Protestants because he wants more power. And he starts to invade south of Sweden into mainland Europe, and he starts to get victory for the Protestants. And through doing this, how is he able to do it? Well, he starts to get some help from the French. Now, you should be pausing here. You should be like, why are the French helping a Protestant guy? Because the French are Catholic. But again, this is where we see the 30 Years' War starts to become political. France, while they don't like the Protestants, they don't like the Habsburgs even more because the Habsburgs are the leading family in Europe. They're the leading family of Spain and the Holy Roman Empire, and France sees them as their main rival. So France wants to weaken the Habsburgs. So they start to help out Sweden gain some land for the Protestants, and they're also going to.
You can kind of tell just how much they hate the Habsburgs if they're willing to put aside their Catholicism and hatred of Protestantism to defeat them. So let's look at phase 4, the French phase.
The French phase is when France is going to join the Protestants and start to fight the Habsburgs. Because remember, we talked about how much the French hate the Habsburgs. So France is going to start to invade a little bit in Spain. They're going to start to invade a little bit in the Holy Roman Empire. And France is going to kind of take over, not take over entirely, but they're going to try to start doing a lot of damage to the Habsburgs. And this is a big victory for the French. And we'll see now the outcomes. We'll get to the end here.
All right, so big document to know. It's actually a group of treaties. It's called the Peace of Westphalia, and this is what ends the 30 Years' War. Super important. So it's going to establish 5 things. First, it's going to establish state sovereignties, interstate diplomacy, and really all that means is that the balance of power in Europe is going to be restored. Right? We're not seeing one group or one family having that much power differential versus other people. And then the second one is the reestablishment of religious pluralism through the restoration of the Peace of Augsburg. So now Calvinism is going to be recognized as state religions. It's going to limit papal authority in German states. Really goes kind of back. So this whole 30 Years' War started with religious tolerance, with the Peace of Augsburg, and ends with that document as well back in place. And number 3, the Holy Roman Empire is going to be declining even further. Right? This is the result in the decline of the Habsburgs, increase in power of local Protestant princes, and German states could kind of choose their religions. All of those things, the Holy Roman Empire is not going to be that strong. Number 4, France is going to emerge as a dominant force. We saw that they were marked a really big turning point in the phases of the war, so that helped a lot. And then lastly, they're going to acknowledge the united provinces of the Netherlands as independent from the Spanish Habsburgs. So thinking back to kind of how they focused on the Netherlands and England, well, Netherlands got the independence that they wanted. So let's look at a map.
So now I just wanted to show you the map of what Europe looks like at the end of the 30 Years' War. So we'll see, right, in dark blue, France should stand out to you, strong, powerful country. Spain, still strong and powerful. But as we see, what used to be the Holy Roman Empire was more united. We see very broken up into a lot of different groups. But we also see the Dutch Republic, the Kingdom of Denmark. We see how big the Kingdom of Sweden is, and how the Ottoman Empire in that light green is kind of kept off to the side. They're kept from getting too much involved with the rest of Europe.
As always, here are the historical developments that College Board really wants you to know. We really appreciate you watching. Another shout out for our AP Euro students. You're the best. See you all next week, or actually for the next video, on the Catholic Reformation.
Until then, bye.